Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is our honor to welcome you all to the 7th webinar of Decentralized Learning Series. Today's topics include decentralization and the state of the art on digital identity and interoperability. So without any further delay, I'm passing the floor to the general moderator. Montse, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Elias, and thank you all. Good afternoon, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for some of you. I'm so happy to see in the chat so many people following us tonight. Today and tomorrow, this morning, it's incredible how much connected we are. This is about decentralization. This is decentralized. I will thank from Alastria. This is Montse Guardia, General Manager of Alastria. Alastria is an association, non-profit, born in Spain, founded in 2017. And we have been running around multi-sectorals and multi-technologies. We are agnostic in blockchain technology, but we are focused on that, on the construction, on the building, and on delivering as much as possible all the basis of the decentralization to make growth the economy, looking after sustainability. We are following the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from United Nations. We are following the aim to be very inclusive, and we are following the aim to have cultural diversity. So this association is open to all of you, to all of us, and trying to do with our members to build a lot of bridges, because decentralization is the new internet, is the new way we will be telecommunicated. And thinking about that, thinking about building and constructing, there is two key topics for all of us from here, from Europe, that we are really interested to depict, to understand, and to have two panelists, two panels that are going to be really intense in terms of understanding what is going on in terms of digital identity, what is the state of the art, and what about interoperability, how we are creating this large, big, new internet decentralized. But talking before, I have the honor to have an excellent, and I think I'm completely, I will say, astonished about the level of the knowledge that Professor Silvio Micali has in cryptography and in all the bases that are talking about this new internet we are building together. So I will give the floor to our Professor Micali, Silvio Micali from Algorand, to explain us about what we need to understand from this new internet, what is the next steps, why we need to change our mindset. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. We will stay tuned. This is Alastria. We are going to general moderate all this event tonight, 2 hours of very intense topics, but very nice ones. We are building the future from the present. So thank you very much, and give the floor to Professor Micali.
Good morning, everyone. Very nice to be with you today, even virtually, and look forward to a great conference with you. All right, blockchain, from myth to reality. So I think that let's start with the aspiration of a blockchain. What is a blockchain? It's a decentralized database that is readable by anyone, writable by anyone, and inalterable by anyone. The potential of such a blockchain is great. Who does not like a database that cannot be altered? Who does not like transparency? Who does not like the ability to generate trust among people who barely know each other, if at all? However, in blockchain, there is a very basic tension between aspiration and technology. By the way, we are humans, and we better raise the bar. Our aspiration to be always to be higher and higher. However, at some point, we need to support them with real technology, otherwise we'll become very generic. So what is the challenge? In other words, what was so hard that make realizing the potential of a blockchain? Is it securing the chain? No, but actually ensuring that the content of a block or the order of a block cannot be changed at all. That requires prehistoric technology, cryptographic technology. meaning cryptographic technology which is decade old. The whole difficulty is choosing the next block. Should I choose the next block, or should you choose the next block? Whoever has this power has a tremendous power, more power than any absolute monarch in the past, because this person will determine which transactions are going to be seen by the entire world and which transaction should never see the light of day. How is this problem, it seems almost a political problem, has been approached? In proof of work, the original idea of Nakamoto is that, well, it should not be me to choose the next block on behalf of everybody, nor should it be you, but rather we are going to have a computational game. There is going to be a cryptographic riddle, very hard to solve, but the first one to solve it has the power to decide the next block on behalf of all of us. Well, sounds good, because sometimes I win, sometimes you win, but in reality it's a slow process. In Bitcoin is once every 10 minutes a block is produced. It's very expensive and is ultimately centralized. Why? Because when things becomes expensive, fewer and fewer people can afford them. And if you don't have thousands and thousands of refrigerated supercomputers, by the way, you cannot even have a chance of selecting the next block. So, and by the way, this heats up the planet, but there is no further need of doing this. Good, great first idea. Next one. Next one is a delegated proof of stake, which can be summarized roughly by saying, you see those 21 people? Don't they look honest? Yes, they do. Let's believe that they will remain honest in the foreseeable future, and let's give them the power of choosing the next block on behalf of all of us. But wait a minute. If proof of work, due to cost, became over time centralized, delegated proof of stake is centralized by design, because one is centralized, but so is 21. So there have been a lot of other proposals, bonded proof of stake, etc., etc., etc. But let me tell you what my problem is with these approaches. These approaches, according to me, have a flawed logic. Namely, the whole economy is secure if and only if the majority of a small piece of the economy are honest. Sounds puzzling? Yes, it does, because it is puzzling. Essentially, I'm saying that there is a very small portion, this green dot in the whole big economy, whose majority is required for the whole system to function. What is the small piece? It is the miners in proof of work. Now you tell me, in the global GDP, what fraction of it is represented by the miners? You cannot see them by naked eye. You not even see with a magnifying glass. You need an electronic microscope. And in delegated proof of stake, this green dot are the miners. Right? Whenever you want to take the success and the security of the whole enterprise in so few hands, you are buying yourself a problem. Then what? Then new is the following approach: pure proof of stake. Let me tell you what does that means. That means that every token has the same power of any other token to generate the next block. And these tokens not to be bonded, they're always where they want to be, at your fingertips, ready to be spent, ready to be transmitted, ready to be exchanged in your wallet, invested in the opportunity the blockchain gives you. And the system is secure if the majority of the tokens are in honest hands. Put in another way, in a pure proof of stake blockchain, to subvert the chain, it is necessary that the majority of the tokens should collude with one another and bring down the chain, the very chain that they own the majority of. And by the way, this is unlikely and is certainly different from having the entire chain independent in very few hands. Good. And in such a pure proof of stake, how does block generation work? Block generation works as follows. Every block is selected by a sequence of ever-changing committee. Each committee consists of 1,000 tokens, by the owners of 1,000 tokens. And these owners, they should propagate a single short and easy message, and a new block is born. So 1,000 tokens are randomly selected, they belong to somebody, these somebodies choose the next block, done. And next block, different 1,000 tokens are random, possibly different owners, a few seconds, new block, done. That's, by the way, is the way Algorand blockchain works. A natural question is, thank you very much, Silvio, with randomly selected 1,000 tokens, but who selects them? Who selects this committee in a pure proof of stake? The strange thing is, no one. Committee members select themselves. That sounds terrible, because if I am a bad guy, I select one of my token every time to be in every committee. But not so fast. What does it mean that the committee members select themselves? Means that I play my own cryptographic slot machine individually inside the privacy of my own computer. I cannot cheat, even if I'm an entire nation full of computational resources. I cannot increase my probability of winning this lottery with my slot machine. And when I pull the lever, which I can pull down only once, two cases occur. Either I don't win, in such a case I can say whatever I want, I'm ignored because I'm not part of the committee of the next block. But if I win, I also obtain a winning ticket, namely a mathematical proof that I'm part of this committee and my opinion counts, and I propagate my winning ticket and my opinion about the block throughout the network. Great. Let's now analyze it. I claim that this is super decentralized. Why? Because, for instance, in Algorand, how many tokens there are? 10 billion. That's a lot of granularity. And each one of them has equal chance as any other token of winning the lottery machine. So if you have 10 billion tokens and you want 1,000 tokens to win, you select the probability of winning of 1 in 10 million. That's it. This is super scalable. How long does it take to lower the level of my slot machine? 1 microsecond. And it is 1 microsecond whether I own 1 token or 2 tokens or even a billion tokens. It doesn't matter. It's 1 microsecond. 1 microsecond is very fast. And by the way, if I win, what else should I do? I should propagate 2 short messages, a winning ticket and my opinion about the block. Is this scalable? Yes. Now let me argue that this is secure. First of all, I've already said, I cannot alter the probability of winning my own individual lottery. But assume now that I'm a very bad guy. Not only bad, but very powerful. I can corrupt any 1,000 people on earth I want to corrupt. Whom I want to corrupt? I want to corrupt the 1,000 owners of these winning tokens. But I have a problem. I do not know whom I should corrupt. Should I corrupt this gentleman in Brussels? Should I corrupt this lady in Shanghai? I don't know, because I cannot predict who is going to win their own individual lotteries. But once the winners propagate the winning tickets and their opinion about the block, now I know who they are. And I immediately, with my extreme power, I can corrupt them 1,000 people immediately. But so what? Whatever these 1,000 people have already said is virally propagating throughout the network. And I not have the power, no longer that any government has the power, to put back into the bottle a message that, say, is virally propagated by WikiLeaks. So the system is secure because beforehand I do not know whom I should corrupt, and ex post is too late to corrupt them. And essentially that is the way pure proof of stake solves the blockchain trilemma. And by the way, that is the Algorand way. That's the way in Algorand committee are selected. Algorand is an alternative blockchain built from first principles with advanced technology, because sometimes it's better to start from scratch than to patch something that doesn't work. And this novelty occurs both at the consensus level, which I just spoke about, as well as smart contracts and chain interoperability and all other goodies in blockchain world. So let me tell you a little bit about smart contracts. Traditional layer 2 smart contracts suffer the same tension between aspiration and reality that blockchain suffered from. Because such layer 2 smart contracts obstruct the critical path, and they are very expensive, very slow, and actually very fragile. No day goes by that millions of dollars are not lost to some smart contract gone wrong. So smart contracts, however, they need not to be traditional. For instance, in Algorand, we have our own way to approach it, which are layer 1 smart contracts and smart square smart contract. That is, smart contracts that happen to be really smart. I don't have the time to tell you about the smart square contracts. Let me focus on layer 1 smart contracts. What are they? First of all, they are smart contracts. What is unique about them is that they operate at the consensus level, which is the most secure level in every blockchain. And they do so without slowing down the propagation of the block. A layer 1 smart contract has the same efficiency and security of ordinary payments. You can execute 1,000 layer 1 smart contracts in 1 second if you so want. And what type of things can you tackle with this layer 1 smart contract technology? One example is simultaneous exchange. I have a blue user as an asset X that the red user wants, and the red user has a red asset Y that the blue user wants. How do we exchange it? Can we call in a trusted mediator? No thanks. First of all, because it's third person trusted by both parties, if we live in different jurisdictions, different continents, can be very rare. And second of all, trusted mediator wanted to be paid. How about the traditional smart contracts? Well, I just said that they're slow, costly, and fragile. No thanks. How about hash time locks? What are they? Never mind. But whatever they are, very slow and vulnerable to denial of service attack. So then, what happens at a layer 1 smart contract in such a simultaneous exchange? It is done by a single transaction in a few seconds without writing or hiring to write any additional line of code and a modest price of 1 per thousand of an algo, 1 milli algo. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Your exchange is done, peer-to-peer, secure, fast, economic. What else can you do? Well, you can do conditional payments. I pay you if and only if you pay her, if and only if she pays him, as is always the case, for instance, in a supply chain. Who wants to go first and pay his or her dues? Nobody, because you don't know what the others are going to do. Again, in a layer 1 smart contract, such complicated and intricate and interdependent payments can be done in a single transaction, in a few seconds, 0 line of new code, and a 1 milli algo. I push my button to do my payment, and I know for sure that either everybody else does the same, which I'm not sure of, in which case all payments are executed, or no payments are executed, including mine, and I never lose control of my money. You can do also asset tokenization. I'm a builder. I build an office building. I want to sell it. It cost me $100 million to complete it. How I want to sell it? I would rather tokenize it in 1 million units and sell them to anybody who wants to buy all over the planet. That is the guaranteed way to give a direct access to such an investment to everybody, even for a mere $1,000 can purchase a piece of my building, and is the best way for me to receive the value of what I really have generated. Way better than selling to a handful of billionaires specializing in real estate. So I'm a really believer in asset tokenization. It's really crucial to future finance, future FI. And somehow is the way to go. And in Algorand, at layer 1, you can specify who is the issuer, how many number of tokens you actually are issuing, what is the maximum number of tokens you are able to issue during the lifetime, who has clawback power and everything else. And you can do all this, again, in a single transaction, which takes only a few seconds, requires 0 lines on new codes, and it costs you a milli algo. Technically, it also takes a tenth of an algo in order to keep it off balance. But if you close the account, you can recoup the tenth of an algo too. You can do auctions, transparent auction. Nobody can challenge them. You can do collateralized loans. You can do all kinds of things. Who knew that there was so much room at the layer 1? And let me tell you what this means for our blockchain future. So one thing is meant actually, you can actually print a lot of tokens. So CI, the Italian Society of Authors and Editors, are minted 4.5 million NFT on Algorand, representing the digitalized rights of 100,000 Italian artists. Traditionally, one such an NFT might have costed $100 to mint, and by the way, this would have been $500 million investment just to post these rights on chain. And then I also believe that this tokenization is going to have a fundamental influence on asset management. In fact, there is a natural evolution of an asset management for mutual funds to EFTs, and I do believe that tokens is the next step. And by the way, there is many more things like this that the blockchain is going to do. And we are going to see a convergence between traditional finance and decentralized finance. That is my belief. So my take is that blockchains do benefit the world, but are sophisticated mechanisms and require sophisticated technology. I am a technologist, as you know, so I'm a little bit bullish on technology. I really believe that technology is quintessentially human. Ever since we came down from the trees to forge our first tool, we became more rather than less humans. Technology is the creative realization of our human aspirations and is our best response to the complexity increase that we experience every day in our society at large, in finance in particular. Technology is our past, our present, and our future. So good conference to everybody, and long live technology. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Professor Micali. You are right, and we agree in Alastria, technology is present, is past, present, and future, and we are building from the present, the future, and we want that this future is more fair, is more human, and it serves us to be sustainable around the globe. And this is why one of the critical pieces we are building within all this understanding of the decentralized technologies is digital identity. And this is the next panel I'm very happy to present. We are going to have one moderator. He's Carlos Pastor. He's coming also from Spain, but he has been abroad quite a large number of years. And also he has been living internet from the beginning. Carlos, you started at the beginning with one of the first startups that was later on one of the operators. And I'm really proud that now we are still there, no? And we are still building this new internet more fair and more sustainable. Thank you to join us. Carlos Pastor is also in Alastria our leader for the Commission of Digital Identity. He has been working with more than 100 people, people coming from different members of the association, different backgrounds, and you have achieved one of the key things for Alastria, to have a model. This is the Alastria ID model. This is a general model that has been presented to normalize. And we have the first norm that is coming from Spain, the UNE norm, and that is pushing new standards around Europe and around the globe. So thank you very much for leading the commission, and thank you very much for moderating this panel. I leave to you, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Monse. Yes, I'm quite old. I was in the beginning of the internet, working on the growing of internet from the beginning. Okay, then I have the pleasure to have such a great people in my panel that I will just name them and then let them introduce themselves. There are Susana Marañao, Nacho Lamillo, and Sebastian Manhart. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well or not. Please introduce yourself, please. Susana?
Okay, I can start. So first, thank you very much for having me here. It's my honor to be here. I am Susana Maranhão. I live in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I work in the Brazilian Development Bank. We are experimenting with blockchain since 2017. We did some applications, some actions to develop the ecosystem, and more recently, we are creating a national blockchain network. We were inspired by Alastria. I am very happy to be one of the first ones to discover Alastria in 2019. I was in Spain, and I was very excited to bring here to Brazil. We did a partnership with Blockchain, that's also a regional network that's also inspired by Alastria, by the way. And also I'm also involved in some groups. In special, I'm the vice leader of a work of centralization in ITU. That's an agency, a specialized agency of United Nations related to ICT in general. Thanks.
Nacho, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, thanks, Carlos. Hi, everyone. My name is Nacho Lamillo. I have a peculiar background because I'm a lawyer doing work in tech. I've been involved in identity management and trust services during roughly 22 years by now. And the last years, I've been involved also with Alastria. We are a bunch of Alastria believers in here today, where I'm involved in trust management. I act as the chief trust officer of Alastria. I'm also involved in the standardization activities. I'm a colleague of Carlos in the UNE working group, and I've been appointed as convener of SAN CLC JTC 19 working group 1, which aims to produce a European standard on decentralized identity management. And I'm here to share my views on how this technology can help building a new world. And this is going to be aligned with the future eIDAS2 regulation, which we are going to know more about next week when the European Commission announces it. But I can share that Politico has today explained that in this regulation, DLT is going to be regulated, so which is great news for us. So thanks.
Good news.
Thank you. Let me have to introduce myself. Sebastian Manhart. I'm the advisor for digital identity at the Federal German Chancellery. And you might be aware of, you might not be aware of, in Germany, actually, we've launched a wide scale public-private partnership led by Chancellor Angela Merkel, which is trying to bring self-sovereign, decentralized digital identity to all Germans. My role specifically is the European outreach. And so I've been, talking to 250 plus policymakers, government individuals across Europe to understand what the landscape looks like, what other countries are also doing on the topic of digital identity, but also SSI and decentralized identity. In a previous life, I was an identity entrepreneur. I founded and scaled a nonprofit biometrics company, which was working mainly in the global south. So that's how I got into the space. But now I've moved to the government side. And yeah, very excited to be part of this panel. And thank you for inviting me today.
Okay, thank you to all of you. Again, it's a pleasure to lead this panel. Well, taking into account your travel, all your meeting all over Europe, how can you describe the momentum of SSI, of decentralized identity in Europe right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a first go here. I think we cannot look at it without looking at what's happening in the world right now, because the COVID-19 pandemic has had a massive accelerating impact on the topic of digital identity as a whole. So both governments, including the German one, have, I think, been caught on the wrong foot and realized that digitization had not progressed as well as it should have been by this point, and that digital identity was missing in many cases. Same way the private sector found that suddenly, you know, the demand just ramped up for digital services. And so you had both private and public sector facing a demand that they couldn't cater for, and digital identity was a key missing piece. Now, that's part of the answer. That doesn't answer why self-sovereign or decentralized identity. That just answers why digital identity. Why self-sovereign? I think what I'm seeing, especially in Europe, is that Europe, I think it's fair to say, has been one of the most privacy conscious places on the planet, and has led the way in many cases, such as the GDPR and privacy frameworks that have been developed. And when you have a choice, when you're faced with the reality that you have to get digital identity off the ground quickly, and you have a choice, I've seen several places in Europe, not all, but several countries, gravitating towards you know, a privacy by design, highly secure approach, such as the self-sovereign one. So that's what I'm seeing, and why I'm very excited to see several people jumping on it. But yeah, it's obviously still early days, but I have the hope that in Europe we'll see more and more of this at government level very soon.
Okay, then, well, very interesting. We will go into deep details later. Susanna, well, naturally, Alameda and myself have been involved in also in standardization effort, but I think that your effort is great. Can you please share the ITU standardization effort? How do you see the state and roadmap ahead, please?
Okay, so the standardization work of ITU started in 2016. We have been working with blockchain and study blockchain since 2016. We, as a formal group, we started in 2019, but before we were like a focus group, like studying the technology, and we developed our attention to terms and definition, ecosystem, use case. We analyzed more than 50 use cases, a bunch of technical things like architecture requirements, and how to compare different platforms, regulatory aspects, in special technical aspects of regulatory frameworks. More recently, we are dedicating our work to interoperability and governance, also upgradability of smart contracts. And we are discussing identity in the context of interoperability and governance. So we do not have standards on decentralized identity. We are reusing the standards of W3C. We found that the decentralized identity, the DID and verifiable credentials are very useful to this domain. But ITU has proposed the traditional digital certificate, that X509, that we use it every day on the internet, and we use it to bureaucratic things in our countries, right? So we have some analysis about what types of use case we should stay with. We can stay with the legacy technology, with things that we have today, and what kind of use case we can migrate. It's more appropriate to migrate to this self-sovereign identity, because you know it has a cost, right? It's very useful, very flexible, but it has a cost. So we are analyzing these different use cases and these different approaches to achieve interoperability and governance. So you asked me about the future, right? So again, we are seeing these two concepts as a way to achieve interoperability and governance, and we know we are aware that other organizations are also doing work related to that. So we are promoting monthly events that we call the meetups events, in order to talk, not to be close in our group, but also talk with other groups. So we always bring some topic, and we invite people from different standardization bodies or different groups to help to achieve a common view for the ecosystem. And we also have participated in events promoted by other organizations. So for example, NATBA is doing a lot of work to establish a common ground of standards, and European Commission also last year did the convergence of some years ago. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And Nacho, you have mentioned before that the ADAS regulation is almost out of and ready for us to read. I can share with you that I'm really looking forward to read that new version of EIDAS. I'm sure that you cannot share everything, but I'm sure that you can share some insights about the new regulation. Please let us know as far as you can.
Okay, well, there is part of the story that is already known. So 1 year ago, the European Commission, in fact, published a tender where they explained they were buying the process of the different policy options assessment for the new EIDAS. And it was quite clear at that point in time that the future was regarding electronic identity at the European level. So probably what we are going to see next week when, if everything goes well, the proposal of the EIDAS regulation is published, what we expect to see is a regulation for a European electronic identity system. And this approach, we can imagine that it's going to be decentralized by nature. And this is quite important because in the European Union, we don't have a problem with legal identity. This is not the European Union. It's not like in other regions in the world where there is a lot of humans without any legal identity, which is a real problem. And that has implied that the UN has a sustainable development goal around this topic. This is not a problem in the European Union, except perhaps for the refugee problem. So we start that from a point where we have legal identity. So we do not really need an SSI approach as it was generated from a philosophical perspective. We don't feel that we need an alternative stateless digital identity, which is centralized, where the member states are not intervening at all. Probably when we think about decentralized identity, even if we call that self-sovereign identity management systems, we are thinking more in the ability of taking our legal identity and being able to share some attributes of that legal identity with third parties. And also we are thinking on the possibility of getting credentials from public parties and private sector bodies to, again, combine these identity attributes into digital personas and being able to share these. And it would be really a good news if finally the European Commission, the European Parliament and member states do really create a system where we have really foundational identity backed up by the government, because that means that we have a public identity for good, but also the possibility to have the control when sharing our attributes. So probably we are going to redefine somehow in the European Union from a legal perspective this SSI concept. And it will be more around the idea of personal autonomy and control when sharing, and even the possibility of building our digital personas, but less on the idea of we don't need anymore the state for ensuring our foundational identity. If everything goes well, in few weeks, we will be heavily discussing this from a regulatory perspective, and probably this will be the time to involve governments, to involve industry, to involve everyone to be able to push this forward.
Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting, this approach of integration between legal identity and the centralized identity. That is probably a term that I like more than SSI, because SSI probably is well, for some countries has sense. I think that's I agree with you that probably in the European Union we don't have that lack of legal identity or original identity. So we need to build on top of what we have, and not to try to fight again. I think very interesting, and we're going to go deeper in that term, I'm sure. Going back to Sebastian, in any case, feel free to intervene in all of the questions, even if I address to some of you. Sebastian, what do you think about the relationship between public and private activities related to digital identity? And specifically, what can you share about, well, I've seen that you have already shared the white paper, but anyway, can you share how do you see the approach and the combination of this more focus in public administration and public area, decentralized identity, digital identity, and the private initiatives? How can they be combined, and how can them enrich each other?
Yeah, sure. And again, I was on the on the private sector side before, right? In a biometrics company, and so I can understand, I think, both perspectives quite well, and you need both. I think that's the punchline. There are some governments, some countries in Europe, in the world, that have tried to go very heavily one direction or the other, and that usually hasn't gone too well. So when you go too heavy on the public sector side, and EIDAS and the first iteration of it is a good example of that, you will, as an example, as a German, I use public sector services 1.2 times a year. I use private sector services probably 30, 50, 100 times a day. So if you're going just the public sector side, you are going to lose out on traction, on usage, on utility. If you go just down the private sector side, you lose control and create dependence. A good example is if we don't do anything for the next 10 years, we kind of know which big tech companies will move in and do it for us, right? And that's the reality. So I think it's an illusion to think that you can go just one way. So you need both at the table. That's a starting position that I take and that the German government takes. So then the question is how to collaborate. So the private sector has strengths, right? Their strengths are, they are agile, they're fast moving, they have a lot of users already, and they can create offerings that people love and use every day. The government is less good at that. The government is very good at creating frameworks, creating regulation, regulating financial flows and capital investments. And that's what we need the government for, right? And also create trust in sort of a long-term roadmap. So I think we just need to get together and make sure that the players collaborate at the same table and try to bring their strengths to it. And that's the only way we're going to do it. But I can tell you that it's tricky because from a government perspective, putting my government hat on, you have different companies that have their interest is to maximize their own footprint and create as much of a monopoly as they humanly can in this digital identity space. The interest of a government is to create an interoperable, competitive market where no single provider has too much of a market share. So there's challenges there, there's tension. But my experience, and I can talk about it more if we want later, in Germany is it is possible to get everyone around the same table. And we have to, otherwise it's not going to work.
I think that is one of the dimensions of identity, private, public, private. And then there is another different dimension that is also very interesting, that is the individual identity against and compared to legal entities' identity. Probably, Susanna, can you share your ideas about that? How do you see how they can be combined also, and in relation also with the other dimension about public and private sector?
Okay, so I can tell you a bit about what we are doing here. So as I said before, we are creating this public Brazilian network, but we saw other networks like DLS and blockchain, and our goal is different. So we saw some goals before related to create a coordination of the ecosystem or promote financial inclusion, but our initial goal was to increase the trust of the society in the government. So with this goal, we did not need so much self-sovereign identity in our initial use case. What we are planning to do in the beginning, we could use the legal technology. So we are trying only to identify legal entities, and legal entities have their digital traditional certificates. So although if we think that's very promising, the type of use case that we are using are involving more legal entities. So for example, tracking public money or public bidding, how to hire services to government, or exchange information among different institutions of the government. All of that, we are dealing with institutions, we are dealing with legal entities. So in the first moment, we are dealing with these solutions. And if we need to identify people, the people is inside the legal entity. So we can rely on the identification of the legal entity provides. So each legal entity can identify their own users, and we can have in the blockchain, we can have the identification only of the legal entity. That's what we are doing, like in the first projects that we have. But of course, a lot of people are also trying to create projects with related to people, related to healthcare, to vaccines, and financial inclusion, these kind of things. And also we have this partnership with blockchain that's focused on inclusion. So for this kind of projects, that's more focused on people, and it's the decentralized identity is killer. So and also we have seen some more new projects related to identify sensors, identify hardware, so IoT device, and for them, like this self-sovereign identity, it's also killer. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Well, another hot question for Nacho. Well, sometimes it seems that GDPR and blockchain are completely incompatible. I will call it the GDPR digital identity or decentralized identity paradox. Can it be solved?
This is a good question, really good question. Well, it depends on the technological approach. So at the end of the day, when you do decentralized identity management, there are a set of pieces in your architecture, and part of the architecture can be based on the blockchain. And of course, it is a really bad idea to put personal data on a blockchain, because it is supposed to be immutable. So you should clearly don't do that. But this is not really a problem with decentralized identity management, because typically speaking, what you're going to use the blockchain for is, for instance, for having control over your decentralized identifier. And you can do this without putting directly personally identifiable data on the blockchain. There are a lot of methods that are anchoring actually the control of your DID, of the decentralized identifier on a blockchain or other systems, without generating the risk of being re-identified. But again, it is a matter of privacy by design. So you should design your system, you should select the diff method, and you should look at what are the functions you are using the blockchain for in a privacy respecting manner. You know that the other big usage we tend to use the blockchain for is, for instance, for the propagation of revocation information regarding a verifiable credential. So that means that verifiable credential is off-chain, meaning that we can delete it and we can prevent illicit access or whatever. But then we use the blockchain just to write down that we have decided to withdraw the right to use the information contained in a presentation that in its terms contains a verifiable credential. That means that we are using the blockchain for ensuring self-control and personal autonomy, which is really nice. And we can do that without exposing privacy, without generating new or introducing new privacy risks. And we can use the blockchain for propagating pseudonymized or even anonymized information regarding objects such as verifiable credentials. So again, you should really have this good design. There are excellent works, even in the standardization field. There are some technical reports which are really, really nice. There is, in fact, one German report, very, very nice about blockchains and privacy. And you should definitely consider this. Of course, if your design is bad, you're gonna die, because it will be killed by the supervisor, and then they will discover your risks one day.
Yeah. It's really, it's really fine tuning and do things in a sensible way, in a balanced way, where the advantages are huge compared to the risk, I think. Well, going back to Sebastian, well, I don't know if this is a politically correct question, because I'm going to ask you about the barriers and forces behind digital identity, decentralized digital identity. What are the institutions, the countries, and everything that you consider to be pushing for decentralized identity and self-control identity, and what are the barriers that should be removed? Please be as incorrect as you can.
Yeah, and I think they're often two sides of the same coin, the barriers and the things that boost it, because you'll see, I give examples. And so I think what's boosting this are first and foremost citizens who are also users of services around Europe and around the world, and who have just a certain demand and expectation when it comes to how they want to live in the digital world. And so they're, I think, the most important driver of this. Then there's obviously businesses, and we're seeing a lot of companies in Europe, for example, that operate across borders. And they have very high costs because of bad digital identity right now. And they're having users who they need to comply with in different ways when they cross from France into Germany. And so there's a big demand from businesses, especially big businesses that operate in many places, for a more streamlined way of dealing with this. Regulation can be a big boost and blocker. So I think eIDAS will be looked upon very closely, because we hear, we see, we think that it's going to be roughly aligned with what we have in mind, but it could also be a blocker, right? Like if it goes in a different direction to where, for example, Germany's heading, that could cause a roadblock. From my perspective, what I see though as the single biggest factor is political commitment, because I'm seeing that there are many places where you have in Europe, but also around the world, where you have amazing private sector initiatives around SSI and decentralized identity. I mean, Alaska is a great example of such an initiative. You've got a lot of people, even in government, at working level, in lower levels of government, who are very excited about this concept. But then it often ends in ministerial infights, and it doesn't get anywhere. And so I see a lot of potential when you have political commitment that the private sector and public sector can then trust and build towards. But it's tricky, because identity in many countries is still a very sensitive political topic. So some, identity is often, there's a lot of blowback. Many countries have tried to introduce, for example, electronic identities, and the public has just gone after them. And so politicians are trying to stay away from it in many places. And then if you throw in the word sovereignty, you make it even worse, because suddenly people ask the question like, what do you mean self-sovereign? The sovereign is the state. And so it's very difficult to, and then don't get me started on blockchain. Like obviously that's an underlying infrastructure component of self-sovereign identity, but as soon as you use the word blockchain in any environment, political environment, people jump in two camps. So there's a lot of challenges around gathering political commitment, but without it, I don't think we'll get far. With it, I think we can move very fast. And so that's going to be an interesting space to watch, is which countries around the world will have that high-level political commitment to facilitate all the rest.
Carlos, may I say something? I cannot stand jumping in. I think that something which is very important to avoid the discussion about the political discussion about sovereignty and the incorrect understanding of identity is precisely to explain that identity is not the same thing as identification. So probably what member states and the states do feel that it is on their sovereignty, and I agree with that view, by the way, I agree fully with that view, is about identification. So identification, which is this thing we call legal identity in general terms, is really the property of the state, and it should be provided for the public good. So it should be not on the hands of private companies to become a business, because it is very tied to the legal rights and the duties of a person. So for me, this identification is nice. The real challenge is how we can combine the baked state identification system with a decentralized way to interchange other identity attributes, such as your academic titles, the fact that you are filed on your businesses, has earned a lot of money, or whatever, any other identity or attribute you want to share. And this is interesting because it's going to help us to model a new kind of data market under the personal autonomy of the owner of the data, not being possessed and owned by big tech companies. So I think that I really believe that combining both worlds can create a data market under the autonomous control of a person, backed up by real good identification systems. So we need political commitment for this. And I think that the companies can really want to play this game.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, good insight. Well, this combination also. Well, there is a question in the chat that lets me think about interoperability. Is a question from And I missed it. Okay, well, it's a question about international, how do you mix different approaches in different countries. I think that in Europe we have some forces to join together, but there are different ecosystems. I would like to ask Susana about how do you say the blockchain, the Latin American ecosystem, the Brazilian ecosystem, and is there we are working together from Alaska and blockchain, for example. And how do you see from your side of the sea this interoperation, this possible collaboration between the European ecosystem and the Latin American ecosystem? Because I think that if we are in Europe, we are focusing very much on the cross-border identity. But I would be more ambitious and saying that we need to go cross-continent interoperability. If you allow me to say that word, how do you see that, Susana, please?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we are in close contact with blockchain. As I said before, we have an MOU with them, and we are. Our idea is to reuse everything that we created on the technological side. So we do not want to reinvent the wheel. What we want to solve is our specific problems, but everything that they have related to identity, for example, they have a very good and active work related to DIDs and to verifiable credentials. And I know that they are a lot in contact with Alastria and EPSI2. So for us, it's a value. The fact that we are using the same technology, we can be aligned. Not only with blockchain, but also with Europe. And they have like 3 solutions to identity. And they have a specific working group of identity that we met every 2 weeks to discuss topics about that. The last is always there, by the way, and we are always there also. So they have 3 different solutions to identity. One is they are calling DMS. That's the name. Actually, the name derived from NIST, the Standardization Board of the United States. It's a solution to where a person or a legal entity can voluntarily disclose your identity. That's similar to what we have in Brazil. So we are actually trying to merge the products. The second one is related to self-sovereign identity. They are really advanced in this topic. They are in close communication with Alastria because you are also advanced and you are using like a real solution. And the other one is a mailbox. It's how people can exchange credentials in the blockchain network, but also the idea is to have interoperability by using mailbox in different networks and be able to exchange information. So for us, to be aligned with blockchain is to be aligned with you, and we can concentrate our efforts to solve our own problems. And also, so we consider ourselves, until now, we are still defining our identity. We have a testnet only, but we consider like a side chain of blockchain. But we used to say that the fork of Bitcoin is not Bitcoin, right? So we have our own identity. We want to solve our own problems. We are really concerned about who our validators will be. And we have a lot of discussions on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Susana. Well, probably all these dimensions about private, public, and individual enterprise and continents and different areas are related to interoperability and specifically to something that I know that you are very interested in, Nacho, that is trust frameworks. How can this trust framework, what is the state of the art and how can this transfer framework efforts contribute to this interoperability that is really required to have a global identity that probably is not going to be, well, I don't know if it's going to be a single network or probably more likely a set of networks that share a common, at least, ways to interoperate between them, common standards, because at the end it's a question of standards, as the internet is based on standards and everything that would like to grow at a global scale needs to be based on standards. How do you see that, Nacho?
Yeah, well, this is again a very interesting topic. So you know that during the first years we've been working on technology. So at the end of the day, if you want to deploy decentralized identity management, you need a wallet, and you need the IDs, and you need a blockchain or any other verifiable registry to anchor things. But at the end of the day, then you get something which works from a technical perspective, but then you have the challenge of getting this working into real processes. And decentralized identity management is really different from other forms of identity management in the sense that the relying party receiving any identity attribute is not directly connected with the issuer of that attribute, because it is you who have the control of this information. But at the end of the day, the relying party needs still to trust the content of the verifiable credential. So if I want to share my academic diploma to prove that I hold a degree on law, and I want to send this into Brazil, for instance, probably the Brazilian government will want to check that this is actually true. And in fact, for this you need trustworthiness, and then you need something we call trust anchors, because you need something about the reliance level of the DID management. You need to say something about the reliance level of the network, which is used to propagate the revocation information. But probably even further, you need to know that my university actually is a university. And you need to check whether this credential I am sharing is an official diploma or not. So that means that you need to convey trust, and this is something we've known a lot of years about around. We built this around PKI, classic PKI, with certificate policies and these sort of things, and we have built also in federated identity management. Problem is that in here we don't have this, as I said, this relationship between the relying party and the issuer. Therefore, you need to convey this information in the credential itself, and for that you need to anchor trustworthiness information in some place. And this is another useful function that is being provided right now by DLTs. So there are big DLTs in the world that precisely are presenting themselves as public utilities, providing information about the trustworthiness of the credentials. This is nice, but it opens, of course, a discussion about sovereignty. And this is really a discussion about sovereignty. So should my university really need to contract a specific network owned by other companies in other countries, not European countries, for instance, that decide who is actually entitled to issue credentials? And this is a real problem, because it could mean that we could make the same mistake as with the browsers, where there is an association that at the global scale decides who is entitled to issue PKI certificates. And this is something which is not bad, but it is, again, even if it is not bad from a technical perspective, I mean, it is really good from a security perspective, it is really complex from a public law perspective. So it can generate a new discussion on digital sovereignty. And that means that we should have a real European networks for instance, for this. And the same happens with other regional networks, because at the end of the day, if identity is something which is anchored on public law because we want warranties, then these infrastructures should be also inside the scope of this regulation. I really feel that there is a place for regulation in this discussion. And it doesn't mean that we cannot have multiple networks, that we cannot move credentials from one network to a different network. We can have this, but it would be unacceptable for me that the Spanish government, for instance, would not be any more sovereign to decide which public bodies or private companies can issue actually which credentials on the network. So therefore, here I have a warning from this perspective, and probably we will need to discuss about this in the future.
Okay, we have 2-3 minutes. Please, each of you take out the glass ball, and please let us know what is in 1 minute. What is the future in, for example, 3-5 years? How do you see the future in 5 years? In just 1 minute, please, Nacho, go ahead.
Okay, well, if our politicians in the European Union do things properly, in 3 years' time, probably we will have solved one of the most important problems we have for the single digital market, which is the identity problem. And probably we will have created a real market for the sharing of personal data under the control of natural persons.
Okay, Susanna, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I have 2 points. One point is, I think the market is still not have maturity about the self-sovereign concept. If you compare with stablecoin, for example, we are more mature now. We have a lot of classification types of stablecoins that we are discussing. But SSI also in Decentralized has different flavors. And I think we still have to achieve more maturity about what kind of decentralized identity, how we configure the decentralized identity in order to achieve maturity to choose what use case should use decentralized identity and how. And also, I also think that decentralized identity can play a big role. I'm doing like a PhD on Geneva University on alternative ways to comply with AML. And you know, the regulators are really strict about DeFi and about how can we turn the market more compliant. So I think that self-sovereign identity, decentralized identity in general, can play a big role in order to achieve what we need to achieve there, in order to bring regulation to this world.
Sebastian, do you think that politicians are going to help us or interfere in this future?
I'll relay Nacho's message. No, but I am an optimist. I think that we will see the vision that Nacho just described, but I also think that it will not be pure SSI. It will be a government-flavored SSI, which will be strongly rooted in strong foundational electronic identity systems, and that's what I hope will happen, because I think that's what Europe needs. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you. I think that it has been wonderful. Some of the questions are reaching very specific points that I don't think that we have the time to address. But I think that all these different dimensions that we have worked on have to be put together in order to have a fruitful digital decentralized identity, but building on the real identity and legal identity that we have today. That I completely agree. That is identification, legal identities, identification, decentralized identities for everything else. But should put together. I think that we all agree on that to work in the favor of citizens and with the help of politicians and with people like Sebastian, pushing them in the right direction. Thank you very much to all of you. Monse,
thank you very much as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Monse, you are mute. The sentence of the year, you are mute.
I'm sorry, I was off. I was saying thank you to all of you, to the three of you, Sebastian, Nacho, and Susana, and yourself, Carlos. We have been following the chat. There are so many questions and comments. Also, you have questions that we will keep it and we will get it answered. So we will send to you and you will get the answer, the person who presented, who has the question. And we move to the next panel. So, and I take some notes for the final remarks. You had said something quite interesting for all of you. So thank you, Carlos, for moderating this great panel. Manuel, you are coming just now. We are talking, no, we need for this digital identity, this idea of how it can be, how it will be. We will need to do something with the current, with the networks, with all the blockchain technology that has been deployed already in different algorithms, different trends. And I think this panel will help us to understand better why it's so critical, the interoperability. And I guess I will ask you, Manuel, to really push Jesus, that is our CTO, to ask him about some of the projects we are having with blockchain and around different technologies. So push Jesus, please. This is one of the tips. I let you go ahead. Thank you, Manuel, to join us. Manuel has been working, is working in Goldline, has a key role from us since the beginning of last year. You have been in around all the world in international panels, and you have been a key member of the European Blockchain Observatorium Forum. So thank you very much to join us and to moderate this panel.
Thank you, Monse. Thank you, Monse. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Decentralized, University of Nicosia, last year, all of you for inviting me and this excellent panel. So far, the event has been really very interesting, and I hope that we're gonna keep that level. At least I have a top-notch panel with me to achieve that. I'm gonna let my panelists to present themselves because I think it's gonna be much faster. I would like to start with Sheila because it's the last one that joined us because we had the last minute modification, and she was so nice and so flexible to jump in the team and to join us. So please, Sheila, could you present yourself?
Hi, Manuel. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor as well. And I do hope to be able to answer your questions. Just a quick introduction. I'm a lead architect in the Netherlands for the Dutch Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment. And we're currently designing a decentralized identity system and a data exchange system based on the W3C standards. I was a long time ago, 20 years ago, responsible for the centralized ID system that we currently have, DigiD, which I have lots of plans to change that now. So any questions you have, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Very nice profile. I will continue with Jesus. I don't think I really need to push you to speak because you are not shy. So, but please go ahead and present yourself.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. I am retired, so I'm not working in any company, but I'm working in pro bono basis in several important activities. For example, I am part of the board of Alastria and acting as CTO. I'm also participating in several activities with blockchain and then some other projects where I participate because I want to participate in projects with social impact. So I'm not very interested in the blockchain as a speculation mechanism, okay, but in the blockchain for the real society, for the real people, and for the real economy.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And then last but not least, we have Pierre Bouley. Again, Pierre, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And thank you for having me in this panel. I'm a computer science professor in the University of Lille. I've been teaching distributed systems for the 20 past years. So I follow the birth of blockchain and all these as a teacher. I've been involved in the European Blockchain Partnership as a member of the technical committee and the diploma use case committee. And the last thing I can say that I am the digital transformation vice president for my university. And as such, I've pushed for issuing digital certificates for all our diplomas. And we are doing that this year. So it will happen in a few weeks. So I'm happy to experiment with digital identity and digital credentials.
Great.
At a scale. So it means 20,000, 25,000 digital credentials per year. We are the largest university in France with 80,000 students.
Okay. So I think we will have to make like a dedicated session to that because it sounds really very interesting to put it into context how you deploy that. Okay, so is there's something in common with you three is that you have a very strong role in defining or helping in the definition of public infrastructure regarding blockchain. You are working, Sheila is working very closely with a Dutch government, both Jesus and yourself, Pierre, you are working with the European Blockchain Partnership, with EPSI, the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. That's apparently is the future for our blockchain infrastructure, at least for public sector services across borders within Europe. and eventually maybe for many other services. So I wanted to start with that context, the context of big public infrastructure. Last week we had a meeting with Digit and INATPA, another association that Alasia is a member of. And one of the nice feedback that we get from Digit, from one of the organizations within the European Commission, is this way to structure challenges to interoperability. They structure in 4 groups. One was legal, the other is organizational, then semantic and technical. Of these 4 groups, legal, organizational, semantic, and technical, which one do you think is the biggest challenge to interoperability? And we can start with Pierre, for example.
I would say organizational. My experience in dealing with the information system of a big university is that the problems are less technical than organizational. People build their piece of the information system thinking about their work and their area without thinking about the others. And when you try to put things together, it becomes complicated because you have to think about the others, which you don't do naturally. So this has to be done afterwards, usually. And this gets complicated because you have to convince people that it's good to work together. So for me, technical problems may be difficult, but organizational problems are more difficult than that.
And what about Jesus and Sheila?
Sheila first.
Oh, thank you, Jesus. Well, it's interesting what Pierre is saying about organizational. I mean, I certainly agree that that's a big problem. Typically, organizations manage everything from their own perspective, and I think that's normal for an organization. One of the things that we've encountered, though, in doing our pilots is that we are running into some technical interoperability issues at the moment, and that they primarily have to do with the interoperability of wallets and blockchains or DLTs. So we're running into some big issues there because it seems that the communication protocols just haven't been standardized fully yet in that area. So I think it's actually it's a matter of experience and growth. You know, as the technologies mature, the interoperability changes shift to the other layers.
Okay, so then I tend to agree more with Pierre, but in any case, when we are thinking about interoperability, we have to ask ourselves interoperability of what, okay? So everybody thinks on interoperability on different terms because the problems they are trying to solve are different, okay? So having said in my introduction, what is my interest, okay? I think that interoperability of essential things for the human beings, essential meaning things which are needed for living, okay, then for me, technical problems still exist because they are not standardized and so on, but they do not compare with legal and then organizational. But legal framework, like for example, we saw in the first panel, is incredibly important, and especially identity, because real decentralization is impossible with anonymous things, okay? So you need identity to have real decentralization when you are thinking on essential things. For example, think about the public education, the public health of a country or of a European Union, public roads, they are permissioned. If you think about internet, it's permission. So everything which is essential is permission. So the first thing you need is an interoperable permissioning system or identities. By the way, for me, it's much more important the identities for the economy of the region. It's more important the interoperability of identities of the companies, the businesses, than people, because at the end, the people I don't see for essential things. For example, when you are building a road or when you are buying something which is essential, like clothing, medicines, and so on, I don't see the people collaborating in a decentralized way, in an anonymous decentralized way, to make, for example, a vaccine. for example, in the pandemic. Okay, so you need really not to decentralize things. You need to coordinate something which is already very decentralized. For example, the public services. For example, businesses. We have 30 million businesses in Europe. And the problem is not to decentralize more. This is to coordinate in a much more efficient something which is already decentralized. For example, local governance. We have 8,000 local governments in Spain. Our problem is not to decentralize this. Is to use blockchain and the power of blockchain to make a coordination which feels, smells like a centralized system, is as efficient as a centralized system, but without requiring a centralized database in Europe, for example, because everybody agrees that if we could put a centralized database in Europe for everything that moves in Europe, this would be very efficient, but this is not feasible, it's not possible. So we need the blockchain to collaborate, not to decentralize, okay? So in collaborating the essential services. So when you think about interoperability for these essential services, I think that the trust system is something which is incredibly important. And we can see this, for example, with the digital green certificate, which is interoperable, is going to be in production in a record time in June, and is not using blockchain, but it can be implemented in blockchain very easily. Actually, later I can talk about a project that we did in Lanzarote, which is a pilot, and then is going to be in production, which is essentially the digital green certificate on top of blockchain, okay? Because it's easy. And then you have the power of both things. The trust framework, because in the digital green certificate, you have a coordination of how one country can trust on the entities issuing a digital certificate in another country. This is essential, and then the technical things are going to be solved in 2 months. So that's not a problem. Is the legal recognition of trust or these identities the important thing for me in Europe, at least.
Okay, I think you three open many different issues I could jump on, a bit too many. So don't worry, I'm not gonna forget about them. I would say main ones that I would like to continue talking is about how to technically carry out this interoperability. Sheila was mentioning that she was encountering some troubles linking wallets with different blockchains, with different DLTs. And there's also the topic that you brought, Jesus, about the digital identity and how we can organize this collaboration. So I just propose you to start with the technical way, how we can approach the solution, and then we get into the identity, because I think it's going to be much larger and impactful, I think, as a topic. And we will then close this session that we started with maybe with the digital identity. So regarding the technical way we can approach this challenge, we are talking about wallets, we are talking about APIs, different DLTs. Which is the best way to coordinate different services that are running on different DLTs? Do we need to make them talk at blockchain level? Can we make them hide them and make all conversations run through DLTs? Do we have to, how would you recommend the approach? And here, I let you decide who is the first one to answer that.
I'm not sure I'm the best one to answer this question. Maybe Sheila would be better.
Or maybe Sheila, because you brought up the topic.
Sure, I'll answer that one from my perspective, at least. Just to give you some context, we are running several pilots using different wallets and different DLTs. So our idea is that we will develop a framework based on the ESIF framework primarily, which is the European Self-Sovereign Identity Interoperability Framework. And what we're encountering is that we see different implementations. We're doing public-private partnerships as well. So we're working with several different, private organizations, banks, and other institutions, universities as well. And what we're seeing is that people tend to adopt a full stack ecosystem. So, examples are Hyperledger Indy or Aries, or different. We're actually using a different one, but we're seeing that the interoperability between those stacks is not top of mind for a lot of people, and that's one of the issues. The key issue for us actually is that we want citizens to be able to choose which wallet they use. We don't want to enforce a wallet on them, and that's kind of what's happening now. And that's the key issue for us. We want people to be able to choose freely and not be stuck with having to choose different wallets for different providers or different issuers, or even different verifiers. So that is a key issue that we're trying to solve. And in that area, what we're seeing is that we'll need some sort of interoperability layer, and I'm thinking of an API independent of the blockchains. So that's what we're looking at. And I think the more we can standardize that, the better off we are in the long run. So those are my thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, no, and I agree with this. But the problem, there has been a problem with the wallets, okay? Because the wallets each have implemented their, let's say, the self-sovereign identity standard in their own way, and so they are not interoperable. But I think that the problem is because the approach has been from the bottom up, from the technology to the use cases, trying to do self-sovereign identity for all types of use cases. Now, the market for self-sovereign identity or for wallets, I think, is mature enough so we can now start with use cases. When you have a pressing use case, which has to be interoperable because the use case is not just for one company or for one small group of companies, but it's pan-European. If you have a pan-European use case which is pressing, and pressing means that it's important, it's urgent, then you will see convergence of all the wallets to support this use case. Like, for example, it has been a pity that the digital green certificate has been issued too soon, or FC has not been implemented in production before, because it's the ideal environment. And then, but this is not going to stop here. So when you have use cases which are pan cross-border in Europe and pan or transcontinents, and there is money for this because there is a need for the citizens and for the businesses, then the technical problems are going to be solved because they are going to go for the implementation of the use case. And the digital green certificate is a good example of something that in the health certificates, okay, if you don't know the digital green certificate, I recommend you to look in detail, because my opinion, this is my personal opinion, is that it has set the basis for interoperability of wallets across different blockchains and even between blockchains and not blockchains for a special type of certificate, which is much more general than just the vaccination and the proof of certificate. Any health certificate can be based on this, and then any wallet that can support this certificate has to comply with some rules, because it's very clear. The data formats, the way of transmitting this using QRs and so on, everything is perfectly defined. The implementation right now in June doesn't use the blockchain, but there is nothing limiting an implementation with the blockchain and a standard wallet. So I think that for anything related to the health sector and interoperability of health data, the digital green certificate is the basis for the future, and interoperability of wallets. And if we do this and the wallets comply with this, then I think that the path to the future for any other type of certificate with this characteristic is not going to solve all the problems in the world. Never. There is not any solution which is applying to all the problems in the world. Each problem has a solution, but there's a class of interoperability, which is basically this type of certificates, okay? They are certificates that are self-contained, basically, okay? They are issued by a trusted entity, which is a laboratory, but then signed by a given country, in Spain by each of the 17 regional communities. And then there is a cross-trust framework, okay? And then that's it. So it's going to be very, very easy. So I think that the wallets should be starting to look at this, because if they do this, the technical interoperability problems are going to be solved. Why? Because the use case is important. Point. And then if you go from the top to down, The technical people should not try to push their technical solutions to any problem in the world. They have to put their technology at the service of citizens and businesses. Okay, and that's exactly what has to happen.
Very good. Does I don't know, Pierre, do you want also to share?
On the technical side of things, there is already examples of wallets which can talk to lots of different technology, different blockchains. For example, the hardware ledger wallet can talk to lots of different blockchains. So it's feasible. If you want to do it, you can do it. It may be difficult right now because you have to write all the adapters to all the different technologies, but it has already been done for hardware wallets. So why not for software wallets?
Okay, thanks all for your feedback on this. I think there's a point that was highlighted by Jesus that is very interesting. At least it's very interesting to me because I've been defending that in many different forums internationally. Do you think that okay, in blockchain, private sector has been bringing a lot of innovation, but I have the personal feeling that it's the public sector who is really lead massive adoption of blockchain. Like for general public, for small and medium-sized enterprises, for everybody to be able to cooperate with each other in a secure and scalable and trustful manner without a third party to overwatch everything. And that's kind of idea that I'm repeating, and little by little I'm starting to get a better feedback. But not everybody thinks like that. So I would like to know what is your point on that. How you see the public sector leading not the full innovation, but the massive uptake of blockchain or DLT-based solutions?
If I may, I think that the public sector, and in this context, the EBSI, EBSI, okay, so the European Commission and the governments and all the participants, and I, as Pierre said, I am also participating there. I think that they are a key enabler of the whole ecosystem, okay? Because again, we need digital identities of citizens which are fully interoperable, okay? Because eIDAS is not enough, okay? And using self-sovereign technology with digital credentials issued by each country is going to be a critical thing, okay? By the way, not being used just for interacting with the public sector, but the identities, the digital identities, are going to be interoperable with the private sector. And by the way, EBSI starts with from the governments, but their path is to be able to participate also with the private sector. Okay, so let's see how the capillarity in the private sector is going to be. But in any case, there are going to be different networks, and then also interoperability of companies. Okay, because in Europe, 80% of the economy is internal market, okay, and 80% of this is small and medium enterprises. And then there is a problem of identity of you can imagine a small and medium enterprise going to Germany, for example, from Spain to Germany and so on. So there is a problem of recognition of this trustworthiness, okay, not just the identification of a company, but things that the company has done in the past and so on. This can be done with a self-sovereign identity system. For example, credentials. This is something that I am also involved with several countries. Interoperability of credentials of Eco Green. Okay, so all the ISO certifications, 14,000, 14,001, 14,004, and so on. So those credentials can be issued as a verifiable credential, and then companies can use a digital credential issued in one country to go to another company, okay? And then so on. So for the real economy and for the growth of the economy, we need small and medium enterprises to have a digital identity which is fully interoperable across borders, okay? And then across blockchains. This is fundamental for the digital economy, for the real economy, by the way, okay? And then you will have the financial economy, which should be at the service of the real economy. And then you have the tokens and so on, but that's a different subject and is not my priority, by the way.
Pierre and Shaila.
Yeah, I completely agree. The problem is not technology; it's about trust. Trust between all the people, the companies, the government bodies, and so on. So yeah, basically, blockchain is a trust technology, and we are in the same area, Europe, but we don't trust each other. Countries work together but don't fully trust each other. At least they don't interconnect their trust architecture. So yes, we need this European blockchain trust infrastructure, be it EBSI, whatever. For the moment, it is EBSI, but we need a trust construct to allow us to discuss together. So blockchain is one solution for that, and the sharing and the interoperability between the different trust frameworks of the different countries or the different areas. Maybe in health they have a trust system. In education we have another trust system, and so on. So we need to be able to share these trust systems in the different areas, and maybe. Gaia-X also is part of the answer to be able to share in a trustful way data between different bodies. We need to cooperate. So yes, EBSI, the new EIDAS and Gaia-X are good good ways to progress in this direction of a trust system all over Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I agree with both of you, Jesus and Pierre, and I think trust is the key issue here. And the way we traditionally look at trust is, I think it depends on the cultural context, but I think especially in certain parts of Europe, public authorities are seen as trusted, but that's changing. You know, in many societies, public trust or the trust in public institutions is eroding. And I think that's a key challenge that we have to confront and actually deal with. What you traditionally had, at least in Holland, and I think in other European countries as well, is a very, strong public infrastructure. And increasingly, and especially with, I think the COVID crisis has really brought to light that we don't really trust each other as individuals anymore, and individuals and citizens are being left to their own devices when it comes to online trust. And that's been a key problem of the internet in recent years. And I think issues such as, being taken advantage of online, fraud and all sorts of issues have caused a lot of people to mistrust a lot of institutions. And I think SSI can really help us solve that problem by regaining the trust that people have, not just in each other and in systems, but in the ecosystem and the economy as a whole. But it does require a different way of looking at identity. And I'm still very concerned about the centralized ideas about identity that are, persisting in Europe. I think especially at the political level, I think that's a key issue. And if we want this system to really work, we have to return autonomy to the user. The user has to be placed, or the citizen has to be placed in control of their own digital identities. And I think that's a key issue that we have to concern ourselves with, especially the EIDAS regulation could really go one way or the other, as Sebastian said in the other panel, and I'm somewhat concerned about that.
No, I agree. I would like to qualify the words that I said before, because I think they are relevant for interoperability, okay? Because I think that with the blockchain, you can solve basically 3 types of problems, okay? That's my classification. One is what I call notarization or certification, which is basically a proof of the existence of something in the past. For example, a diploma, okay? So a university issues a diploma, for example, of a regulated profession, whether you are a doctor or an architect and so on, something that you need for being a professional there, for being an architect and building, or for practicing medicine and so on. Okay, so this is a proof of existence. Okay, so this is notarization. It is issued once and verified many times. So one write, many reads. Okay, so it's scalable. Then you have decentralized workflows. Decentralized workflows is in reality a generalization of notarization. It's basically when a set of entities, companies, public administrations, each say something about something external to the blockchain. That's important. Something external in the blockchain, then you notarize. But instead of being like a diploma, you have something like several notarizations performed by different companies in one workflow. This is the centralized workflow. So each company just says, I have done my job, then the next one, please. And then this is a workflow. Again, this is like notarization. And then you have the real problem that many people are trying to solve, and it's just a very minor thing in the real economy, okay, is transfer of assets, okay, or payments, okay, because payments is a no problem, so in Europe at least, okay, but this is very hard. So when you are talking about interoperability, when you are transferring assets, okay, atomic swaps and so on, then the approach that I am talking about is not useful. But for those two use cases, notarization and decentralized workflows, and by the way, digital identity is a case of notarization, okay, because somebody said something about you and then you can prove this, okay, then interoperability is much easier than when you have to transfer a digital asset which doesn't exist outside, okay, like a cryptocurrency. Then you have real problems of interoperability are with the third type of problems. But if you look at the real economy, 80% of the problems, and just to be conservative, are of the two first use cases: diplomas, health certificates, vaccination certificates. I mean, almost everything is a notarization problem or a decentralized workflow, which can be also performed or be done with the same typology. So with notarization use cases and workflows, you don't have to connect the blockchains. You need this trust framework, recognition of identities of the issuers, okay, across blockchains, and then a common data model for the digital credential, and then the wallets will follow. But if you try to tackle with the same technological solution all three problems, you have a problem, because you have a hammer and then you try to use the hammer for almost everything in the world, which is the wrong approach. So every problem has its own solution for the two use cases or the two types of use cases, which is notarization and decentralized workflow. You don't really have to kill the flies, as we say in Spain, okay, using the same technological solution as for the exchange of digital value, of purely digital value, which is fine. But again, most of the real economy is just notarization and workflows.
Okay, so we were talking about trust issues, also how to interface different use cases, as you mentioned now, Jesus, with notarization, decentralized workflows, which are different approach than transfer of assets and all that. How can we gain more trust in this interoperability works that we are or gaps that we are trying to close? This, for example, in Europe, there is an initiative or a framework, which is interoperability framework, European interoperability framework, if I recall it correctly, and which is kind of a set of recommendations and so forth. What do you think that we will need to really get this level of coordination that will allow us to deploy notarization and decentralized workflow use cases very easily throughout countries? Do we have to implement, bring the European interoperability framework into national law? Do we have to develop standards? What do you think we need to do in order for this to really happen? It's not just be nice to have or best use case or best recommendations.
Well, Sheila, because otherwise I will monopolize.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you just said, Manuel. Maybe just, I don't know if everybody is familiar, all of the attendees are familiar with the European Interoperability Framework. I use it quite a lot, actually. We use it in our work. And basically, the very first question that you started this session with is actually the answer to what that framework is all about. It's about interoperability at the legal level, the organizational level, at the semantic level, and the technical level. And the way I look at it, though, is it was originally designed for public services, for the interoperability and the integration of public service delivery in Europe. Also for the the single digital market. It's a very important instrument in those goals. In Europe, we also have the ESIF project. I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, but it's the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework, and basically it's a framework which leverages, I think, those areas as well from the European Interoperability Framework, but specifically for the self-sovereign identity space. So what I think we can do with both of those frameworks is use it as a as a mechanism and maybe as a way of communicating with each other about what topics do we find important. Like we talked about the legal interoperability, the organization interoperability. Basically, we really need to focus, I think, on all four of those areas, but there are different ways of doing it. And one of the interesting things about ESIF as an initiative is they are using what Jesus actually referred to as the use cases, the cross-border use cases. They're using use cases as a way and a mechanism of enabling the interoperability, because I think, and I have to agree with Jesus on this point, if you put it into practice, you run into the real issues. And that's one of the ways we look at it. So I mean, it's a good method for analysis. That's basically how we use it, but it's not more than that. So those are my ideas about that.
Maybe what I can say is that trust is a social construct, not only a technical construct. And so we need to integrate technology, we need to integrate law, regulation, and it will build itself gradually by usage. People will trust or do not trust anymore paper diplomas because it's easy to counterfeit them. I have never shown any of my diplomas. I've always shown photocopies of them or scans of them. So it's very easy to manipulate them and to show them to anybody, and nobody can trust such. When I recruit students, how can I trust what they show me? So we need this trust framework, and so it costs. You ask people about, is it right what this candidate tells in his CV, and then there are lots of discussions between the institutions, and we try to build trust relations with institutions so that we can check these credentials, paper credentials, faster, and so this builds upon with time of usage of the credentials. So what I expected that if EBSI works correctly, people will gradually trust these credentials, with digital credentials, and then it will become having a credential certified on EBSI will be a mark of trust, which would be trusted by most people as the usage progresses. Basically what I mean is that it's a social construct which goes with the time of usage of the different use cases in the different groups.
Yeah, I'm just trying to oversimplify this, but just to display the concept that we are explaining. For example, imagine that I want to work as an architect in a European country, okay, and then I have a digital certificate. Then the verifier, okay, has to do two things with the verification of the digital credential. One is to verify that it has not been tampered with, okay? So nobody has modified this, and it has, well, it complies with all the formats, and that the digital signature is correct, okay? And then if this is done with a standard digital certificate, X509, for example, okay, these technical things can be done. But then the second thing is, okay, but the entity signing this digital credential, I know that exists because it's a digital certificate which I can check, okay? But how do I know that this is a university and not any other company? How do I know that this university is legally authorized to issue this type of diplomas and is not a fake university or a university that is just specialized in mathematics and it doesn't have this degree, okay? So there is more than identification, and this is something that technology cannot solve per se. So the blockchain is going to solve the technical implementation of the trust framework, but basically the issuers and who they are and what they can do cannot be in a digital certificate right now, okay? So the blockchain is much more powerful than standard digital certificates because we can store this information and many more metadata, incredibly metadata about trusted entities into the blockchain, and we can verify at the end that the root of trust is much easier to check, but not just for identification of entities, but for who this entity is and what they can do. And this is very important to give this trust framework in a cross-border manner and a cross-blockchain manner, okay? So we need both the technology and then the legal framework and the organizational framework to support this trust framework. And you can see this, for example, in the digital certificate, the digital green certificate, because if one German guy is coming to Spain, to Lanzarote, and then we have to verify in Spain this credential, digital certificates can just prove that it has not been tampered with and that the digital signature is correct. But the laboratory who issued or which issued this digital certificate is one of the authorized labs in Europe. This can be done in the blockchain. And then it is much easier to implement than the current centralized technology, okay? Because the blockchain can act as the global repository, which can be read by anybody which has access to the blockchain. And this is a trust framework.
Thank you. I don't know, Manuel, I think you are getting to the end of this panel. It's almost 7. We have been listening to all of you, and we didn't see the watch, and you had kept us a lot of interest on what you were saying. So thank you very much. Thank you, this panel. I know that you are still having maybe some questions, but I'm seeing that it's 2 minutes for 7. So if you allow me, I will just make the closing remarks and just, yeah.
Montse, just 1 second, because I have seen that there are many questions. Is it possible to have these questions and then answer them offline? Because I think it's impossible to answer all of them. Okay.
Yes, for sure, because there is a really very interesting question also. So we will keep them. We will answer offline. We will keep the names of everyone. We will I'm thanking you, panelists, to make this afternoon really interesting for all of us. We will taking some notes, and I will highlight, I think, from all the day, starting this afternoon, morning or evening, because we are globally spreading out the ideas. But one thing that I will say is Professor Mikali has highlighted, no? Technology is our past, our present, and our future, and is something that is going to be and has to be more human. And you in your panel had highlighted trust. No, it's not about technology. You can integrate, we can integrate blockchains, we can integrate technology that's there, but we still need to learn a little bit more how we visualize. And I will take this highlight from Sheila. No, we need to see, we see trust differently because we have cultural backgrounds and we are diverse. So this idea of trust, we may see it globally differently, and we need to somehow know how to integrate it. And I will take from the previous panel, no, this fantastic idea of once we want to integrate some trust that is seen differently within a tool that is the digital identity, and this is what we have been talking all about all this session about digital identity. We need to highlight that if it's decentralized, if technology is decentralized and technology is a tool, how we will make it happen that we will have the centralized ID, and how that will happen with the new situation. So we have something that is coming 2nd of June, the new ADAS, no, the next step of ADAS. So we will see something more next week, and we will keep there, and we hear and we listen quite good what Sebastian was telling us, what Nacho is telling us, this idea and how it's going to happen and what is going to happen in Europe with the new ADA regulation, how we in Europe are looking after digital identity in a decentralized way. And I kept from you, Jesus, a very important highlight about technology and economy. And just true, we are looking after costs sometimes, but we need to look after changing the way of understanding of economy. So be careful with just keeping notarization and automatization of workflows. We need to be better. No, we need to tackle much complex elements in terms of technology. We need to help and integrate legal view and also economical view to have a more sustainable world. Thank you everyone to join us. Everything has been recorded. I will give the floor, Elias. Thank you for letting us to have this window on this decentralized in the University of Nicosia. These webinars, these learning serials are amazing. And we love from Alastia this partnership with you. And we hope we will repeat this seminar in few months. Just highlighting everything we have said is recorded to better studied, and we hope that the scientific paper is coming in these topics. There is a lot of research to be done, and we need to keep constructing this new world and this new internet. Thank you to all attendees, and we will keep all the information in the chat. We know you have been sharing, all the audience from all around the world, you have been sharing very good proposals. We are taking them, and we also welcome to join us in Alastia and globally in this idea of structuring with standardization, having interoperability and having this new digital identity for all of us. As Susanna was saying, and I will highlight, keeping together the continents, no? Also Europe, and in this case we had Brazil with us, and we know they are looking around, and we are working together with them, with blockchain and with other continents. So looking after joining all the world and keeping bridges. Thank you very much to attend, and I will just keep the time. So thanks to all. We keep answering. I know that you are answering questions. Sorry, we need to finish, but we will keep all the information. Thank you, Elias.
Welcome. This has been a very interesting discussion. I would like once again from our side to thank you all our panelists. Also a big thank you to you all for your participation. Just before closing the event, a couple of announcements. As in the previous events, all attendees will receive a blockchain verifiable certificate of attendance. Also, we would much appreciate your input to a survey which will be circulated very soon. And please stay tuned by visiting decentralized.com for more information about our forthcoming event, which will be announced soon. Once again, thank you very much.